Okay, so as well as that, this week we did say we would give you some exam feedback, and we're going to slowly drip feed this to you over the week, taking into account the separate essays that you need to do. So remember, you do your 3 essays across our 3 topics, and we'll start with the historical Hollywood topic to start with, and Casablanca and Apocalypse Now. So we've got the 2 questions that were given to you. Now remember, our topic is about production history and the system behind the film and how that impacts on the creation and the outcome of the filmmaking. There is a question that could crop up on gender, so you can see here the second question is the gender question. We have always said to avoid this. 1 or 2 of you did do it, so remember, we're going to say it's a red herring, and don't do it for our questions. There will always be a production history question or an authorship question, so that's what we're going for. Yeah, you've got to talk about the system of production and how it impacts on the film. Avoid the gender question, because firstly, we don't study it particularly in a lot of depth apart from genre, and also our films don't quite fit with that question. So to create a rich answer, we go for production history or authorship. Okay, just as a starting point, I know we've said this a few times, but you must remember that they're marked out of 40. So to get an A grade, you're looking at 33 plus, and that's a lot of work. You need to write an essay that is full of knowledge and content and exciting, and impressive, really evidence that you've studied these films for a year. So remember, they're divided into 2 parts, which I'll go on to discuss further, but it's general research and facts and context and evidence versus scene analysis, so your knowledge of inside the film and the filmmaking. So look, here's a good plan. This is a plan that me and Alex have put together. It's a simple 3-point plan on how to create the answer. So point 1, introduction and conclusion. You must have an introduction that discusses the question. You must have a conclusion that summarizes your findings and says how you've answered the question. So don't just launch into the films. You must engage with the question and try and kind of reason with what you're trying to do in the essay. Yeah, so you're setting up for the reader what is the point of your essay and what you're going to hopefully try and focus on. Now, point 2, contextual points. That's just all your knowledge, your facts, your general knowledge about the films. You're dropping this stuff in. Some of you are excellent at this, dropping in producers' names, stars' names, studio names, years, dates, budgets, all of this kind of information, just to show that you've researched it and it's factual and you're aware of the context of the films. And then point 3, analysis of key scenes. So this is where you then say, I'm going to analyse a key scene from the film and show you how this film importantly links to the question. So the scene analysis is your evidence that backs up the contextual points. So for example, if you were, this is very simplified, but if you were saying the context of This Is England is a British film, it's about the 80s and Thatcherism, I'm dropping in all my facts and where it's filmed, and it's about skinhead culture. You then say, okay, I'm now going to back this up. I'm going to support what I've said about it being a British film with scene analysis, and I'm going to talk about how the opening scene reinforces the contextual information and that it is a film that explores British culture in the 80s. And then you create the evidence through scene analysis. Okay, so here we have our first essay, so the Casablanca Apocalypse Now essay. That's all we'll do for now because there's quite a lot to read, but this is a good introduction here. It just simply says we've got 2 films to talk about and where they belong in terms of their production history, so a studio system film versus a new Hollywood film, and the student does engage with what the question is asking, which is about individuality and the idea do directors, auteurs have some control over the films? So instantly they're saying why the films are useful, because they're contrasting, and they also do start to say that one of the films might be more experimental or individual than the other. Okay, and there's some interesting definitions starting. Alright, so there is quite a lot to read here, so take your time, probably pause it once I've said what I need to say, pause it and read it again. So, you've done your introduction, you now go on to context. So you are introducing the background of the films. So this is a good little example of Casablanca research, and they're talking about the studio system, vertical integration, artistic control, and what the studios, naming some of the studios, and what that studio system is about, and saying how they control the film. Equally, we have here, again, quite a lot of information to read. Spend some time, pause it, have a little read. The context of Apocalypse Now, so saying that it's linked to the French New Wave, the auteur theory. They create a definition and they're dropping in some names and some dates and saying what the theory means to the producers, actually, of that film. Be a little bit careful of spelling and dates. You're not quite marked down on this, but it will look more professional, and that you've revised these points from revision cards. So just spend a little bit of time reading this. So 2 good introductory contextual paragraphs introducing each film. Right, so 20 marks out of 20, you need the other 20 marks, so you need some scene analysis. So this is a great discussion of Casablanca, film style. They talk about camera work, sound, editing, the use of stars, the way that it's controlled by the Hays Code, and the general feel and mood that's created within this romantic scene. So they are illustrating this is actually the outcome of working in the studio system, and what you get with Casablanca. So scene analysis to back up the idea that the film is from a studio production. Likewise, we have some good work here that's talking about Apocalypse Now. They've set up the idea that it's influenced by the French New Wave, it's experimental, it's outside of the studio system, and they start to talk about the Kurt's death scene, which we've studied, and they start talking about the use of sound, genre, also the importance of editing there with intellectual montage. They reference some history there, and that these filmmakers would have been influenced by European cinema. And they start to talk about how the meaning is created in the film, and that actually it is quite a challenging technical experience for the audience, because it is a new Hollywood film and it is shot outside of the studio system. And then finally you have a conclusion. So you don't just, some of you just starting and ending on scene analysis or on context. Remember, it's like a dialogue with the examiner, so you're explaining what you're doing continually. We've talked about signposting. Conclusion is part of that. So spend just a couple of minutes summarising what you've found. The essay is straightforward. You are basically contrasting 2 different films from 2 different production contexts. So the conclusion is, one is a studio film, one is a new Hollywood auteur film, and they're both interesting for unique reasons behind the production. The debate, I suppose, is that Casablanca arguably has some auteur characteristics because the director is excellent. And we've got a quote there from one of the critics that's on eBrock. It's in our revision, and it says it's such a loved film because it's a little bit of a fluke. Yeah, and it's come from the factory system, and maybe because of Curtis' great direction, has become this iconic popular genre film, whereas most studio films are just genre films created for entertainment and largely forgotten. Whereas Apocalypse Now obviously is this masterpiece that keeps growing and growing, and has a massive fan base and history linked to fan culture because it is so uniquely outside of the mainstream. Okay, so it's a lot to take in, but go back over this PowerPoint, take your time, go through it. Remember introduction and conclusion, context, research facts, backed up with scene analysis that reinforces the point you're trying to make. One film's experimental and uses unusual techniques. One is far more continuity drama and is produced within the studio system. Okay. Just a final point, we will start dropping the other two essays over the week, so give you some feedback on this. Remember, you would have 50 minutes to handwrite, unless you use a laptop in the exam, the answer. So it is a massive challenge. Lots of you did this really well in the mock exam, but just a reminder that we are restricted by time. So it's a little under an hour to write this essay. Even in this PowerPoint, you've got quite a lot of information, but it's only a glimpse. Remember, there is more context. Ideally, you're going to talk about a scene from each of the films. Possibly you could talk about another scene, a third scene from one of the films that makes your argument stronger. But this is the general way forward and plan for essay writing, with the introduction, the context and the analysis. Okay, so have a little read through it again without the audio, and then compare it to your answer. See what's missing. See how you do it. Maybe you've got some better points in your essays, but if you've got lower grades, then possibly some of this structure and approach is missing. Okay, so look out for La La Land, Boyhood, and This Is England, and Shaun of the Dead later in the week.